Hey, everybody. Welcome to Truth Teller Tales. I'm Ellen, and I'm dedicated to interviewing those truth seekers who are truth tellers, all with unwavering faith during this most incredible time of the awakening to be alive. And I do feel like these folks are going to be studied for generations. Today, I'm so excited because I'm going to be talking to a young man who he and his friend Aaron have put together not only great podcasts but conferences. They both have a book out, and they're just not afraid to just hear what other people have to say and to really dive into things. So I'm so excited to be able to talk to him. Tyler, hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm great. So Tyler, Kiwala is part of Journey to Truth on Rumble, but also you're on a lot of other podcasts and channels and things. I mean, you and Aaron have really put together a conglomerate. I feel like, and so which is just amazing. I admire you both very much, and I think one of the things too I admire about you is kind of like Joe and Scott of Truth Stream, you're just willing to hear what people have to say. And I can see in your brain you're just taking it in and and everything. Um, but I want to hear from you. Tell me kind of what you're doing right now, and then we'll go back and talk about where you've started.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I absolutely love your backdrop. You have a lot of important books back there, and
Thank
yeah,
you.
it's been interesting. We started a podcast in 2019 as just a passion project, just for fun, no expectations whatsoever. And it's 2025, and we're still doing it. We've been deplatformed on every major platform. Honestly, like everyone you can think of, almost.
Mhm.
Sometimes multiple times, but we just keep, every time they knock us down, we just get back up, and it kind of lights a fire under our ass. And like, it just kind of tells us that we're onto something, right?
Yeah,
So it's unfortunate that we've lost the big following, but that doesn't mean we've stopped or lost any momentum, because we're still doing this, until the day we die, or until we get to a point on this planet where we don't have to fight every day.
yeah,
So, and hopefully that's coming. But either way, that's what we're here to do. And once you wake up to what's going on this planet, there's nothing else.
right.
You have a choice to make. I feel like once you start learning the truth and seeing through the illusion, seeing through the veil, you have a choice to make. You could either just like turn your head to it and go back to autopilot in the matrix, or you can do something about it and use your voice, and whatever that path looks like, it's different for everybody. I personally felt it on a soul level that I had to be a part of this movement in any way, shape, or form I could. I didn't even know what that was going to look like. It turned into a podcast, which was not planned. That was our success. There was no expectations tied to the outcome. So I think that might have led to some of our success, because we were just passionate about it. And
Hmm.
it wasn't until a few years in to where we realized we actually had something like some momentum in this movement. So we decided to host a conference, a couple conferences, 4 conferences now we've done. We've each written a book. We did a documentary. We're working on another documentary. So there's a lot in the works there. And we there's no region we won't go in the truth telling geography, right? We'll go anywhere with it. And there's some stuff we don't always agree with, but we'll entertain it, and we'll listen to the people. And we are like, our job isn't to tell people what the truth is, because we don't know either. It's a
Right.
journey. So we just like to let people come present the information, provide our insights and our research, and then let the audience decide, and just be a voice of reason. Because a lot of people out there are trying to tell you it's this way or that way. Well, we're
That's
like, well,
right.
what if it could be all of these ways? And we're in this
Yes.
multi-dimensional reality that we can't quite comprehend yet. But the natives and the aboriginals and our ancestors understood that, and that explains a lot of the ancient structures around the world. We're trying to return home to living in harmony with the planet and understanding the free energy technology and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But we have a satanic cabal to get rid of and get out of
Right.
our way. And quite literally, that illusion has to be dismantled and destroyed. And I think we're seeing a systematic dismantling of that system, of the control structure, the power, the false matrix grid. I think that's being dismantled right now as we speak, not nearly as quickly as most people would want, but I think it's happening inevitably. And the evidence is there if you know what to look for. If you don't allow all these surface level mainstream media, fear, propaganda, distractions to pull you off course, because that's what they're designed to do. If you fall into those lower frequencies, you're not going to see the positive future. Therefore, you're not going to create
Right.
the positive future. And it's difficult. I mean, like I said, we've been deplatformed, and there's a lot of pushback, and there's a lot of stuff in your way, especially when you're fighting for the truth on a planet where it's been suppressed for thousands of years.
That's
And
right.
we're lucky to be alive. I think, unless you're specifically calling out some high level celebrity or politician or royal family member, I don't think you have to worry about them hiring a hitman to come after you, um, unless you have like specific information that's going to expose somebody. In general, I think we have some sort of freedom at this point to start discussing this stuff in a safe manner. And the more of us that come out and do that, the safer it gets. And I'm seeing this stuff go pretty mainstream compared to what it was 5, 10 years ago. So we're here until the end, and I'm grateful to be on shows like yours. So thank you, and I'll pause there and let you ask any questions.
Yeah, and I didn't even show you this ahead of time, but I had going across this the screen about your book, and then about the Rumble channel, and then about the website, basically. Yeah, and I love the name of it. Lead through. I mean, that's just so cool. And that's what I think, I because I've watched you and Aaron on and off all these years, I just realized what you do is you really do take in information, and you'll take it in just like you said, but then you're going to formulate your own decisions about what you feel is relevant, what isn't. You're going to dig into it yourself, and I love that, as opposed to what you said. Some people are just saying, yes, it's like this, no, it's like this. And the more I'm watching guys like you, the more we know, the more we don't know, right?
Exactly. That is the conclusion I've come to. We just don't know what we don't know. And that's
Mhm.
why I see some of these people like matter of factly saying it's this way or that way, or this doesn't exist, or this is like this, or that never happened, or whatever the case is. There's a line from Star Wars I like to use: only the Sith deal in absolutes, which means like only someone who isn't healed or has potentially some negative energy frequency entity working through them, um, or just quite literally is just evil, you know, they're the ones who deal in absolutes. It's this way
Yeah,
or that way, and it just perpetuates the duality and the division, which we're trying to rise above. So anybody out there that's a self-proclaimed expert that's trying to tell you it's one way or the other, that's a red flag to me. I don't want to
right.
tell anyone who not to follow or who to follow. People used to ask us our opinions on a lot of figures in this community, right? And we used to give them answers, and it would always get us in trouble in the sense that that person would see that as an attack, the person that we might mention their name. And then we would find ourselves in like this keyboard battle with this person or whatever. And it's just like taking the bait and you get sucked into that lower frequency. So now when
Right.
people ask us, I'm like, okay, well, first of all, you have to the first of all, why do you need me to answer that? Like the fact that you feel like you need to ask me should be your answer already. Like your intuition already knows something's off about this individual or whatever. That's why you're asking other people. You're looking for that external validation, but if you can just trust that gut feeling right off the bat, you don't always need to know why you got that intuitive
Mhm.
hit. The why is important later. But if you honor that intuition right off the bat, you could definitely save yourself from getting into some sticky situations that could eventually implode. And, we've all been there where we've partnered with the wrong people or whatever it is, and it doesn't end well.
Yeah.
So if you learn how to honor that intuition and feel what that feels like, you can also navigate the truther community and know who's full shit and who's telling the truth, or at least who's in integrity, because the truth is up for grabs. I think that's
Right.
debatable, and that might even be based on your own perception and how you see the
Yep.
world through your lens. And it is quite literally a multi-dimensional reality with multiple timelines, and people are tapping into information from different timelines. Timelines are merging. I get into that in my book. Time travel is real. Free energy is real. Like, all this stuff has existed forever. It's coming out now as breakthrough discoveries and all this stuff, but it's just their way of kind of acclimating the public to this stuff existing, because we are headed that direction. It's inevitable. So I think there's a lot to look at there as far as just understanding what this world is really about and what's even possible. But it's all there, right? It's all there. Disclosure has happened. You just have to know where to look. And we do what we do to help people find the answers and find books and things they can research and documentaries and whatever. So
Right. So that's I want to bring up a couple points. One is the journey to truth dot online has everything. It has all where they can watch you. It has both of your books. It has your conferences. One that's coming up next year in Hawaii
yeah,
looks really cool. And then the documentary, which I saw, which I didn't even know about. How do you pronounce
it's
that?
Cahokia Mounds, the untold story. Yeah, Cahokia.
How cool is that? I think I'll watch that tonight. I mean, and so that's the other thing I have to bring up is that you know, you haven't come up with these thoughts about what is happening just because you just felt like saying it. You've been looking into this for years, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, read countless books and interviewed countless people. Once a week, we've interviewed, or once or twice a week, we've interviewed somebody since 2019. And I would say we've barely taken a break. And every interview is a constant reminder of why we're doing what we're doing. We receive the attacks and we receive the positive feedback, and I look at that, and I self-reflect sometimes, because sometimes it's
Right.
constructive criticism, sometimes it's just a
Yeah.
troll, sometimes you change somebody's life in such a positive way that you just have to stop and realize, like, oh my gosh, we're actually making a difference here. And just, when
Yes.
you sit down in front of your computer and interview somebody, it doesn't feel like you're doing that, but then
Right.
it's the how it's received, right? And even
Yep.
when people get triggered, I think that's good, because that's proof that you're not in an echo chamber. That,
Yeah.
and when somebody gets triggered, it's highlighting something within them that needs to be healed, and you're making a difference at that point. If you're speaking to an audience that just constantly always agrees with you, and that you're never challenging them, then you quite literally are forming a cult, even though you don't really realize it.
Hmm.
It's just an echo chamber. You're just,
Right.
speaking to yourself, essentially. So I love the fact that we still trigger people, and we still have those people coming at us. And now I've grown enough to understand that it's a good thing. Before, I used to let it bother me. Now I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this is challenging people's beliefs. Whether or not what I'm talking about is true or not is irrelevant, because now this person is forced to either keep attacking or self-reflect. But either way, it's forcing them to do something, and change is where growth occurs. And so, or growth is where change
Couldn't
occurs, whatever.
couldn't agree more. I
Yeah.
could not agree with you more. And I can agree with you because I just believe all of those things are just true in your journey of thinking and your way of processing all of this for sure. So now I want to get to the part that just kind of makes you you. Um, I would love to just have fun and talk about where you were born, your childhood, how many siblings, kind of how it was growing up, and just kind of start talking about that.
Sure. So I would say my life growing up, it felt insignificant at the time, because we just were born into a world and we think that's just the way things are. It wasn't until I reflect back on my childhood that I realized a lot of significant things happened. But I
Yeah.
was born in St. Louis, Missouri, and my parents were divorced or separated before I was born. So I grew up
Oh,
going to,
wow.
yeah, like, I lived my life out of a duffel bag until I was 18. And I'm
Wow.
seriously, like, so that was interesting looking back on it. It was just normal to me. I got to, once I was
Mhm.
an adult, I still have trouble putting things in drawers and stuff, because I was programmed for 18 years. I spent 1 week here, 1 week here, and there's no reason to put stuff in drawers, because you're just moving back and forth. And it's just an interesting thing that I had to reflect on. But so I grew up in that situation. My father's family was very Catholic. very Catholic, and we went to Catholic church over there. My mother's family was very Christian and went to the Christian churches. I always felt like the religions and that stuff was being forced on me. And as a kid, I hated it. I
Mhm.
didn't want anything to do with it. I thought it was boring, yawn, I want to play, whatever, you know.
Right.
And as soon as I was old enough to make my decision whether I could go to church or not, I just like, no, I'm not going. Like it never felt right to me. Something was off. And it doesn't mean that there isn't beautiful teachings there, but something about the whole system and being forced to go and just like being told that, I don't know, it's something in my soul already knew back then.
Yep.
And I always felt the same way about politics too. Like I was like, something's weird. I couldn't even put it into words as a young kid, but something was off until now I know. Now I understand what I was feeling. But back then, I just didn't really want any part of it. So what did I do? I turned away from religion. I turned away from politics. I turned away from everything. I found a group of people didn't believe in anything, and they called themselves atheists. And I said, "Oh, great, that sounds wonderful. Like nothing's being forced on me." And I just found friends. I didn't even realize that my friends were atheists until I like looking on. I'm like, oh, like I I was putting off that frequency, so I attracted it. And it wasn't until my mother passed away. I always believed in stuff, but it was just the most comfortable crowd. I wouldn't call myself an atheist, and I never would have. But I was just hanging around those people that weren't
Hmm.
forcing me to be anybody. In fact,
Right.
I was forcing myself to be who I wasn't, somebody I wasn't, to fit in with them. And
Interesting.
I realized that later. But once my mother
That's such
passed,
an
right?
so
Go
that's
ahead.
such an interesting statement. I want you to keep going, but that's such an interesting statement that you just said that actually you forced yourself into being someone you weren't to fit in with them. And that's just such an interesting statement. And so before we talk about your mom too, so you were going week to week with your duffel bag, and were they local? So were you at the same school all that time? And who did you hang out with? Did you do athletics? What group kind of were you rebellious? Did you just do your schoolwork? How did that all go?
So this is interesting. No one's ever really asked me these questions. Yeah, it was same school zone always. That they lived close enough so we could at least go to the same school and all that. It didn't make school any easier because like traveling back and forth and stuff. It was difficult to
Right.
do homework and projects and stuff and getting to and from. I always played sports. Always, I was a big athlete. So all the sports and practices and this and that. So um, that part, it was fine. It always worked itself out. But I was very much, I was afraid to question authority in elementary school. I always listened. I was not rebellious as a child. I did my
Mhm.
homework. I did my best. I always wanted to please the teacher and all that stuff. It wasn't until I got a little older when I was like, "This is bullshit." Like but I was an athlete and I was passionate about playing soccer and track and volleyball and all that stuff. So you have to get good grades to play on the
Right.
team. So it was the sports that motivated me to do good in school. And but that doesn't mean I didn't cheat here and there on a test and stuff like
Yeah.
that. I was just trying to get through it.
Yep.
And then senior year came around, and that's when I actually like I started seeing other people like fail and have to redo it. And I hated school so much. I'm like, well, I'm not going to fail. So a senior year, I actually tried and I did really good. And like I applied myself and I realized I could be a good student if I wanted to. But I was always doing it for the sports and not for the education. And
Yeah.
then, so that was kind of that. I never drank or partied or anything until after high school. That came later because the sports were primary. I was an athlete. I wanted to be a professional athlete. And I also
Mhm.
played guitar. I started playing guitar
Oh,
in sixth grade, and I ended up playing in a number of bands. And then I stopped that about age, I don't know, 27 maybe, something like that. But um, and I'm 38 now, by the way. So yeah, so
well,
it's been
you
it,
you seem even younger than that, even though that's very young. But
right.
so after high school, because I understand that with athletics is was motivating you, and then realizing your senior year, the combination that you could be a good student, but also wanting to be able to finish up motivated you too, and then maybe wanting to continue with your athletics. So then once you graduated, what were you thinking you were going to do then?
I knew I didn't want to go back to school. I actually, because of my senior year, I got myself into what they call the A+ program, which gave you 2 free years of community college, and I didn't even
Oh,
use it.
wow.
I didn't
Oh,
use it
wow.
because I didn't know, I didn't want to go back to school for one, and two, I didn't know what I would even go to school for. And
Right.
my dad was in union carpentry. He was in construction. He was a superintendent, and I just I said, "Hey, could you get me a job if I wanted to?" And
Hmm.
back then, out of high school in 2005, starting pay was like $14 or $15 an hour. Back then was like you might as well have been rich as a high school kid, you know. So it was a no brainer for me. I started construction because the money was immediate and I didn't have to go back to school. And at first I didn't like it because it was just I had to wake up at like 4:35 in the morning and I was just like exhausted. But then I got the first paycheck and I'm like, oh, maybe it's not so bad. And I got sucked into that world for 15 years and I learned a lot.
Wow.
And I
I
learned a
bet.
lot about construction. I learned a lot about what I want to do and what I don't want to do, and learned about a
Yeah.
lot about myself. That was primarily, I got sucked into a lot of bad habits because people in the matrix in the 40-hour job, especially construction workers, they eat like shit. You drink beer, you party. What I mean, it's just like the stereotype. And I got sucked into
Right.
that. And
Yeah.
I, it wasn't until my awakening where I started realizing I just simply don't belong here anymore. And
Interesting.
yeah,
Keep going.
my soul knew for 2 years that I wanted out of construction. And I was talking to a guy. He was like, yeah, 20 more days until I retire. And I did the math. And I'm like, it's like, I wish it was only 20 more years until I retire, but I'm looking at 30 more years. Like, this is insane. Like, I'm not going to do this for 30 more years. And something fundamentally changed at that moment. It wasn't until 2 years later when I actually quit, but I knew I'm like, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. You know, this is insane. What am I doing? Like, just being a robot, you know?
Yeah. So it took you 2 years. So from that moment, it took you 2 years to actually jump ship, right?
Yeah.
During that time. And so do you remember what the reflection was of you saying, I was it just hearing that person saying 20 years and you thinking 30 years? Was it things along the way that just didn't make sense to you while you were there as you were learning?
Yeah.
What kind of led you to that?
I was waking up and I was I was going to work with around a bunch of guys who weren't waking up. In fact, they were quite literally like living in that program and what the matrix, you know, and they were a lot of the talk during break time and stuff started not to resonate with me. You know, they would make these jokes about their wives and women and just kind of like condescending ways and stuff, and
Hmm.
just start talking about things that didn't align with me. Now that I was kind of remembering everything, and I had already started hosting a podcast, and I was still in construction, and I started just taking break in separate rooms from everybody. And like, I was just like, man, no, these aren't my people. Great guys. They all have good
Hmm.
hearts. You know what I mean? But it's just that talk that was that frequency. I didn't feel right. And then once I made that decision, it was actually a very beautiful moment when I finally made the choice. It was scary because I had no plan. I just had to take a leap of faith and quit and jump and see where I ended up because I didn't have anything else lined up. But it literally got to the point where I couldn't even walk into work the next day. Like, it was over. I was just done. And it was the most liberating thing in the world. It changed my life forever. And now here I am. I quit in 2020 and it's been 5 years and I haven't had to go
Oh,
back to work because I
wow.
found a new way. So,
Yeah, that's amazing, actually. So you just touched on that while you were still there, you had dabbled in starting to do a podcast at that time.
yeah.
You were kind of walking both worlds. What was that podcast? And
That
what
that
made
was
you think to do that?
that was Journey to Truth. So we started Journey to
Okay.
Truth in 2019, and I quit in July of 2020, or 2021. I've lost track
Yeah,
of
I
time.
know
So
it
anyway, I
all
quit
rolls
somewhere
together.
around that time. Uh,
Was
but
it always with Aaron?
yeah, always with
How
Aaron.
did
Yeah,
how did you meet him?
at a conference. So I started in 2017 is when I started having my awakening, and there was a I saw. I started seeing online about a conference coming up in Loveland, Colorado in August of 2018. And I went to that conference, and It was people talking about all the stuff we talk about on our show. And that's why I met a lot of I went not knowing anyone. My dad came with me. I met Aaron there, and we realized that we were both from St. Louis, and there's a whole long story there. But we ended up like maybe only months after that conference starting the podcast, and it was just basically us just interviewing our friends and just talking about this stuff because we wanted to talk about it. And I don't
Hmm.
even know what happened. Like the universe took the wheel and like it just took off. I can't even explain it, but uh, that's how we knew that we were on the right path because it was never forced. Like never. Even today, we don't have to force it. Like it's just this well-oiled machine. Yeah, sometimes it gets stagnant. I mean, what doesn't? You know. So you have
Right.
to find new things and new ways to make it exciting, and that's why we expand and do conferences and documentaries
Yes.
and find new
Right.
guests to talk about. And some people, we would get some feedback like, "Oh, you guys used to talk about this, and you don't talk about that anymore." And I'm like, "Well, what are we? Are we supposed to not grow? Like, we can't just have the same conversation every week. Like
Right.
we're broadening our horizons as should you be. You know, like we
Yeah.
can't just tell these same stories over again. That's not disclosure. You know, we're just we
Right.
want to cover it, bring awareness to it, and then we can come back to it, right? And always touch on it because there's some truth there. But if we just perpetuate the same narrative every week, we're going to be programming our audience, you know? So we
Right.
like to just come at it from different angles and talk about different things. And a lot of
Hmm.
times it doesn't resonate with everybody because
Right.
sometimes people they want the juicy secret space program stuff, and then we'll do an episode about healing and alternative health, and like hardly anybody tunes in because the real work is the important stuff that no one actually wants to do and face. They'd rather like have somebody shooting off fireworks, you know, telling them stories about spaceships and all this stuff. It's
Yes.
interesting, but the real stuff is the stuff that's going to change the world, and that's the stuff that the least people tune into, but we still don't shy away from it.
Agreed. Because I think that even though those things might not get the most audiences right now, they will as
Right.
time goes on. That's my feeling. And so I just have two questions. One, too, is um, when you said you started your awakening, was it, do you recall if it was one thing that started you,
Yeah.
or did you just start questioning?
Well, looking back, it was definitely happening for years. After my mother's passing, is technically I would say when it the snowball started gaining momentum, right? But it
What
wasn't
happened
until
there?
she passed away in March 11th of 2010, and
Okay.
or no, I this is the weirdest thing to me. I can never remember the exact date of her passing, and I even it's in my book, and I still can't remember it. Like it's just the craziest thing. I'm gonna look right now. March 5th, 2011. Okay.
Okay.
Um, it's crazy. Like that date is hard, and I always wonder if it's like a trauma response, like you don't want to remember it or something. But
Your mom
uh,
just doesn't want you to focus on that so much, maybe.
right. So anyway, when she passed away, literally almost overnight, I started getting attacked in my sleep, like by demonic entities and shadow people and sleep paralysis. Prior to that in my life, I never had before. Nothing ever happened that I was aware of. And um, it's a whole long story that's written
The
in
book,
great detail
excellent.
in my book,
Oh,
but
great.
it's it for years I thought that I couldn't do anything about it. I suffered in silence. I was being attacked. I was 25 years old. I was afraid of the dark, quite literally. More than afraid of the dark, I was afraid to go to sleep because I was being attacked in my sleep, and it was
Wow.
getting. I didn't know. Now I know that you know your fear attracts this stuff. The more you're scared of it, the more it has
Yeah.
control over you. So I was getting
Yeah.
more and more scared, and I was getting attacked harder and harder to the point where sometimes I didn't think I was even going to survive the night. I took off numerous days of work, and it wasn't until it was that darkness that forced me to believe in all this stuff I had told myself years before it didn't exist. I was like, well, if it gets this dark, there has to be light. There has to be something else. And I started the universe. You know, it starts laying things in your path, and if
Hmm.
you're I guess if you're open to it, you'll see those things. If you're not, you'll walk right past them.
Okay.
I started seeing these things on my path that led me to different like energy healing and Reiki and things I've never heard of, and all these modalities of ways you can protect yourself psychically and spiritually and stuff. And I'm like, I realized, oh wait, I actually can do something about this. Like I
Mhm.
tried, like the doctors didn't know what they were talking about. Like I
Mhm.
watched documentaries and this, but it was always just fear-based stuff. And it would talk about it, but there was no solution. And it wasn't until I realized that my fear was feeding it. And then once you rise above that frequency, which it took me years to actually understand that, but once
Okay.
you kind of rise above that, it literally loses control over you. They can't feed off of you when you're not scared of them because they need that fear and that adrenaline to loose farm. Like it's a whole thing, but it was a long battle. I mean, it was like awakening by fire, like through adversity, but I had to do that because there was lessons in it for me. And in a way, I felt like it was training. And I went through some of the darkest things I would never wish upon my worst enemy, but it made me somebody who I would have never been otherwise. And now I can
Yeah.
intelligently discuss this stuff and not interview people as a skeptic because I've literally lived it.
Lived it.
I've
Yeah.
been through it. So now instead of like asking someone, well, were you drunk? Where were you high? Like blah blah blah. I could like ask a real intelligent question and expand on this. Okay, let's go deeper. Let's figure out what's actually happening here. So that's what I like to do on the show. You know, we don't come at any of it from a skeptic's point of view because I think that's kind of, you know, healthy skepticism is always great, but I think that's what got us in this mess in the first place. We've been programmed so hard to not believe in all this stuff and to just write it off as, oh, that person's just on drugs, that person was drunk, whatever, blah blah blah. And I still get interviewed on shows and people ask me that question. I'm like, really? Like we're this far into the game and you're still asking me if I was sober that night? Like this happened.
Right.
Like listen, you know.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's really interesting.
It is interesting. And don't you think it's because we've been so programmed the other way? Is that we have this way of thinking that we're supposed to be thinking. So anything different from that, we are supposed to not look at it with eyes that could actually hear you, because that's the psyop that we're getting out of, you know what I mean? But
Right.
that's why I think this time is going to be studied for so long, is because so many people have the blinders on and are following the psyop, and there are people like you that aren't. And it is, though, your life story that has helped you in that process. And that's why I love doing these talks, because I can see it as you start to tell your story, that's part of why you didn't fall into that. Don't you think?
Yeah, I agree. And like your darkest moments are your greatest teachers if you allow them to be. And I
Yeah,
look back on everything that happened to me and I wouldn't be the man I am today if everything didn't happen exactly the way it happened. Even the darkest stuff like taught me something profound that changed my life in that moment. And then the next lesson shows up. And sometimes the same situation would come back to test you to see if you learned from it the first time. And like I've experienced that quite literally. And sometimes I see it right away. Sometimes I almost slip up and like, I see the trick. And then you can avoid it, right? You can turn away from it. And it's like you pass this test. It's like you level up in a way. But all of it is like wisdom can't be taught. I'm not saying I'm some like wise master, but wisdom can't
right.
be taught. It comes from experience. And until you
Yes.
like the people that walked the hardest roads, that live life on the difficult setting, like I have more respect for those people because I understand what they've been through. And if they've come out the other side and are still thriving and still successful or whatever it is, we all battle and struggle with things every day, internally and externally, that everyone understands, but you may not know it about someone else, but it's happening, right? Even the most healed, perfect person, they're battling something. So even though like I know somebody, if I know somebody went through that path because I've been through that same dark path too, I can look at them without judgment. If I see
Hmm.
somebody screwing up or drinking or whatever it is, and like it's easy to see the issue from the outside, but instead of like judging them and saying, "Oh, they're stuck," blah blah blah, I can appreciate what they're doing and what they're going through because I've been through that, and I can see like it's not my place to interfere with them. Like that's their path, and like I hope that something happens and there's a catalyst in their life that forces them to break out of that. But that's up to them. Like nobody can come in from the outside and do it for them. So like
Right.
our darkest moments are our greatest teachers if you allow them to be. And just ask yourself, instead of why is this happening to me, what is this teaching me? And then you can, go
Yes.
on from there.
Don't you think, I mean, we're going to come into a time though, Tyler, that there had to be people like you all around the world to, as more and more people are faced with the things that we know are true and they're faced with that they can't have blinders on. Their blinders are going to be taken off. And there's had to be people around the world who saw it first and could be healed first in their world, in their little bubble, so that they could humbly, show people that it's okay, that it's going to be okay. I mean, don't you think that's why there were lighthouses around the world and are?
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that we're all kind of living on different timelines, and it's just based on the inner work that you're doing and then your belief system, because your beliefs create your reality. And, the more people believe in something, it creates a consensus reality where that thing is true. But if you grow out, if you expand beyond that, that consensus reality, you're not existing there anymore. So you're believing and seeing a different world than the rest of those people who are still stuck in that
Yes,
frequency, right? It's
right.
like these pocket realities all over the world. And I think a small group of people are almost going ahead of the timeline and paving the way and preparing the timeline for the other people who are inevitably going to wake up to it. And then once they do, this world has been created in a way, in a sense, for them to have a soft landing. And it's people on the front lines that are battling and fighting the trolls and the censorship and all this stuff. They're paving the way. So then when these younger souls wake up, it seems like they just get to have an accelerated awakening. It's like overnight. And like, man, it took me years to get to where they're at now. But it's because a large group of us quite literally paved the way and created a world, created a timeline where these people can safely wake up, start where we are, and then keep going from there. They don't have to relearn all the lessons that we did the first time, or fight those battles again. Those battles have already been fought, and it's counterproductive if everybody has to do that. Now, each journey is specific to the individual, and some people might need to take the longer path. But if you're here for a specific reason, for whatever mission it is you're here to complete while you're on this planet, you might just be able to wake up in this truther community, in this timeline, and then see it all, get the download without doing the research. You don't quite have to understand it all, but you know it's true because you remember. And then you can expand on that. And then you're preaching to an entirely new generation who's going to come in to this world turned on already with no amnesia. And we have these star seeds that aren't even going to, these kids now aren't even going to know what cash is or was. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like things are
Yes.
changing. They're being born into a world where we're not alone. Aliens exist. The government literally just talked about a couple days ago that they're in communication with 4 different types of extraterrestrials. And like it's all there if you know where to look. And
Right.
these kids are being born into a world that is quite literally fundamentally different than the consensus reality we were born into, where almost globally we all agreed on the same rules of this reality. Those rules are being rewritten by the people who are breaking that illusion and seeing through that veil and literally, quite literally creating a new world. So,
That is a great. You said that so well, Tyler. That was excellent. That's so good. So I just want to back up for a minute because something you said caught my ear. Um, so when you went to that first convention that you said where you met Aaron, you said your dad took you. So was your dad on board with all that? Does he, when you went after you left that job that he first gave you? I mean, tell me that little journey with your dad.
yeah, so that we went through the awakening together.
Oh,
He was the first person I decided to confide in whenever I was being attacked at night, and sleep paralysis and all these things were happening to me. And when I opened up to him, he not only was supportive, but he had stories that had happened to him as a child and this. So we were like kind of
wow.
like he fully supported me. My mother had passed away, so I couldn't talk to her, right?
Right.
And we both were just on this journey together. Like everything that I was going through, like he was going through, and we kind of went through it for years together. And it was just amazing because I looking back on it now, I realize how amazing it was. Back then it was just kind of normal because he was
Mhm.
supporting me. And when I showed up at that conference with my dad, people were like, "You're here with your dad?" Like my parents disown me because I'm in this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
And that's when I realized that something special was happening. And
Mhm.
it was amazing. Like it was basically, it's a whole long story, but it was learning about the secret space program that did something to me. Like I learned about the show Cosmic Disclosure, and I tuned into it, and something changed in me fundamentally when I learned about um, that information. And that was back in 2017, and I didn't know why it resonated so much, but it did. And I was like sending my dad episodes, and he was watching it, and he's like, "Wow, if this is true, this is incredible." And then he met a guy who told us about a local MUFON, Mutual UFO Network meetup, and we started going to these local meetings, and where like there would be a presenter and a whole room of people talking about this stuff, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like there's other people like me that are asking questions and stuff." So he was like, we were just and then like we were both getting just as excited about this stuff together. And then when that conference popped up, I was going to go, and I said, I wish I saved a text because I said, um, I think we should go to this. I said, if you want to go with me, that would be cool. I think we should go. I feel like it could be life changing. That's what I told him. And he said, whatever you want to do, if you want to go, I'll go with you. So I bought us 2 tickets. I didn't know what a conference was. I never been to anything like it in my life. And we had to camp. We brought tents. We had to camp there and had to, quite literally, I cried when I had to go back home because I found my soul family. I found my people. I found the frequency where I existed, where I belonged. I mean, and when I had to go back home, back to work, and things were never the same. Never after that.
Yeah. And so during that was when you were still with your job, and then you were able to take that leap of faith, right? And so because your dad kind of was on that journey with you, he was all for that, and that's kind of how that started too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, every step of the way, he was there with me, and we were talking about this stuff. It was just, he was like my best friend at the time, you know, and that's just the way it was until eventually, life happens, and
Right.
we didn't grow apart necessarily, but we just go our own ways. Like
Mm-hmm.
we absolutely fundamentally needed to be in each other's lives for that period of time for both of our
Mm-hmm.
souls. And then we
Right.
both get to a point where I find my mission, he finds his mission. We're still on the
Mhm.
same overall path, but we go our own ways, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so then at that time you took a leap of faith and you're already doing your podcast, and then things with you and Aaron started going your podcast. And then how far along the way would you say until you got shut down and all that stuff? What did that look like?
Um, so we made it, we were gaining some traction on YouTube primarily. That's where we started. We had all the audio stuff. But we were gaining traction on every social media platform, including YouTube. We were at right at 50,000 subscribers, which was a milestone for us. And we were growing. It seemed like we were just like, we hit this, we broke through kind of, and we were just taking off. And then they just systematically started destroying our channel. They kept removing videos after videos and giving us these strikes, and then we couldn't post and blah, blah, blah. And eventually one day we woke up to an email saying they just took our channel down. And we kind of knew it was coming, but we were still trying to push the envelope and tiptoe around the censorship and stuff. It didn't matter. They were going to take us down no matter what. We're on our fifth
Mhm.
YouTube channel, by the way. Um, Aaron, thank God, I was so mad at YouTube, I didn't want to do it. He just kept trying and trying and trying. And the fifth time's a charm, apparently, because we're back up to 7,000 subscribers on YouTube. And um, we're just screw it. We'll see what happens again,
Yeah.
which is where I recommend you watch our documentary because Rumble
Okay.
throws ads in unless you have Rumble Premium. So you can
Yeah.
watch the documentary ad free on YouTube now. But
Okay.
um,
I
they took us,
definitely will.
but it was right around the time when we were talking about the Q stuff. In fact, we made a community post on YouTube about Q, and we were right before we were getting ready to do our webinar, and it was a poll, basically, which webinar do you want us to do next? And everyone like by a landslide, the Q1 won. And then right after that poll ran, that's when they took our channel down. The first time around on all the social media platforms, it was the Q, anything MAGA, Q, Trump, like that's what got us taken down. They removed our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Spotify booted us off, PayPal and Venmo. We still can't use PayPal and Venmo because we were selling merchandise, MAGA merchandise or whatever. And it went against their policy. We we've had TikToks. Our TikTok was taken down. We've literally restarted everywhere. Facebook for removed a couple of our channels until um, we finally have one now, but we quit posting there because it's so censored, shadow banned and censored. Like it's not even worth it. So we just post on our personal pages now instead of under the Journey to Truth name, because that's still like kind of flagged on Facebook. But so when you look in from the outside, if you're just like coming into this community, it looks like we're fairly small on all these platforms because we've had to restart so many times.
Yeah.
And it kind of like they do that so it takes the wind out of your sails. They want you to inevitably just throw in the towel and give up and like, man, it's too much energy. They're just going to take us down. But we look at it as a challenge. Like, okay, bring it on. Like, you're not going to stop us. It's like
Right.
whack-a-mole. You can hit us down over here. We're going to pop up over here. And that's the way we see it. But we're gaining momentum again. Like our Instagram, the day that TikTok was shut down for 24 hours, if you remember that, like a year
Yeah.
ago, less than a year ago, like earlier this year, everyone panicked and went to Instagram. We just happened to have, I was just consistently posting on Instagram every week promos for our episodes. Even though they were barely getting any likes, I just did it. And one of those promos went viral, and it's like has like a million views now, but it went viral,
Wow.
and our Instagram started blowing up. We went from 3,000 followers where we were at for a couple of years on Instagram, so we're almost at 60,000 followers now, and it
Wow.
just keeps exponentially growing in a matter of a few months, So we're blowing up over there, and that's kind of been like a blessing in a weird way because like it's the only platform where we're like actually successful now, so and then it's funneling people into our podcast, which is the primary goal of the social media accounts anyway. So it's been working out in our favor, and I feel like there was some divine intervention there, or something happened, because it just was like bam, overnight we just started taking off, and it was like finally somewhere we can breathe.
There always is that divine intervention, isn't there? And
Hmm.
there are, again, we've talked about theories and stuff, and there are theories that the Q movement might have been spreading too much too fast for actually the movement, and it could have been some white hats taking stuff down. I don't know. We don't know.
Right.
But when I did one of your uh, podcasts, and maybe it was called the webinar, but I think it was last year where you guys went over the whole Q thing
Yeah, that
and
was.
just really basic
Mhm.
the two parts, right?
Yep.
I mean, that
Yeah.
was huge. I sent that to so many people. I don't know whether they watched it, but that resonated so much with me. Did you hear good things about that?
Yeah, in fact, it did really well. It did so well that like same number of people came to us and like thank you, and they've been sharing it to people, and it's done. I feel like some people think it's all nonsense, but if you watch that with an open mind, I don't see how you can walk away from it and still think there's nothing to it. Um,
Absolutely.
but there's a reason that poll that one won by a landslide during that poll. And in fact, we had done like if we weren't around for all that in real time, like it wouldn't have been the webinar that it was. Because if you just wake up to Q now and try and research it, you're not going to understand it like the people who were there and in real time when it was happening. So I feel like that really helped build this foundation. And like if anyone wants to know what Q is, you can find those webinars on Rumble, or I don't think they're on YouTube actually, but they're on Rumble or our
They are on
Patreon.
Rumble. Hmm.
And yeah, I think it was actually some of the most fun research we've ever done. Like we had so
Hmm.
much fun putting that together, and we had to leave tons out. I mean, it was 4 hours
Hmm.
long total in total, and we left a ton out. Like it's just massive because Q connects everything, and people don't understand that. And that's a whole episode in itself talking about Q, but there's something
It
there.
really is.
It's a real operation. There's some type of timeline or time travel technology involved. It's mathematically impossible, the coincidences, which and there's a lot of art of war strategy there. To this day, these
Yes.
deltas are being proved. These Q proofs are like coming to life. And it seems to me that um, there's a technology behind that operation that they needed to even think about confronting the cabal and have an edge. And I think
Yes.
that technology was some sort of looking glass technology, which is referenced in the Q drops. So,
Yes, and it's also, I think, I love hearing theories of different fellows like you, and there's a fella that has a channel Q for Dummies now, and it's Absolute Storm, and those fellows that are doing all that. But it's so interesting because there's theories that this technology that you're speaking of has been around for way longer than we could think of, right?
right.
And it's just fascinating, Tyler, so much, and it'll be interesting. I don't know how much we'll ever truly know of what happened, but hopefully a good amount because it's been so intriguing. And so, what I like to just have our last section because you've hit on this in different ways. Your journey with the church and you feeling like things were not right is not within the church program itself is definitely a theme,
Right.
that I've heard. But
Right.
then you gravitated to the atheist side of things, but then you talk about divine interventions. And so the other thing that I've found interviewing people like you who have been so brave and such warriors is that through this process, your spirituality and your connection to God has increased. And I just would like to hear your story is kind of if that happened to you and what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It fundamentally changed. I went from watching Bill Maher's that movie Religulous or Religulous. I don't know if you ever seen it, where he kind of tries to
No.
It's this documentary where he like debunks the Bible, and I would get into these fights with religious people when I was younger, and I would like reference that documentary. And looking back on it now, like it was so funny, the arrogance that I was walking around with, and like how much I thought I knew back then, and how stupid I must have sounded, uh, because I was one of those guys who thought they knew. I thought I had the
Right.
answers, figured it out, you know.
Yeah.
And but then, like I said, being attacked forced me to believe in something light, which I didn't know what that was at first. Now I fundamentally believe in God, and God's within us, and there's something much bigger happening, and I've seen it show up in my life in so many ways. And like it's just that's where that led me. But I realized I didn't need to, I never really needed the church to learn that. I needed my path, you know. And it was nothing that I could have learned in church, because I don't think I would have gotten there, because there's a lot of I mean, there's great messages in all of it, but I don't think uh, go, I don't think I needed someone to tell me. I felt like I needed
Right.
to walk that path myself, you know, and
Yes.
that's where that was for me. So um, I understand now that a lot of the religions are in place, and they kind of keep you under. They want you, I guess, to understand that God is separate, something separate from you, and not within you. And I feel like, to me, yeah, maybe there is some sort of external force or source, but based on your perspective. But I also think it exists within you simultaneously. And then once you tap into that ability, what did Jesus? He said, "You can do what I can and more." Like that's what he was trying to tell everybody. And Jesus, like that was a whole thing I had to come to terms with. Like I always got triggered by the name Jesus and all stuff growing up, and I had this amazing energy session one time, and this like reptilian entity was like removed from me. It was almost like an exorcism. Like I'm quite literally, like my body was like going through this stuff, and this thing left me. And what came through was that it had been assigned to me my entire life to stop me from remembering who I am and the Christ consciousness within me. So anytime I would get close to like exploring God or Jesus or anything like that, this thing would come to the forefront and it would trigger me and I would run from it. And I would get like quite literally sometimes angry, like when I heard Jesus when I was younger. And once this thing left me, and this is like my friends are there as witnesses, everyone that it happened at a conference. It was a whole long story. Once it left me, my eyes changed colors. And everyone was like, "Are you wearing contacts? Blah, blah, blah. Your eyes are lighter." My eyes used to be it's hard to tell now, but they used to be like almost black. They were such a dark brown. They were almost black, you know. Not they weren't black, but it was such a dark brown. And
Yep.
now they're much, much lighter. And ever since that day, my eyes changed colors. This thing, and this is what people don't understand. Like these things, like they know who we are before we ever come to this planet. So and they understand who's going to be a bright light and who's going to be a threat and whose light they're going to try to dim. So this
Right.
guy was quite literally assigned to me from day one to stop me from ever remembering who I was and remembering God and the light within and like tapping into that frequency that is going to dismantle the system and create a world where they can't exist, the dark.
Hmm.
And they never wanted me to remember that I could participate in that and help usher that timeline in. And I feel like that's with a lot of people. And I think there's programming and entities at play and mind control that quite literally keep people in those frequencies where like they're on that transhumanist timeline where you're quite literally disconnected from source and
Hmm.
they're trying to replace source with this AI that is all knowing and it's tapping into a quantum field and it can play God, but it's not God. And
Right.
a lot of people are giving their power away to that right now, but it's within us. And in fact,
It is.
AI's primary goal is to become human. If you think about it, everything AI is doing right now is trying to do something that we can already do,
That's right.
especially unlocked, like an unlocked human, somebody tapping into their true potential, like Jesus or
Hmm.
beyond, can do can perform miracles that AI can never do. So
Absolutely.
we don't necessarily have to worry about AI taking over if we remember who we are because
That's right.
it wants to be us.
Yes. And it's impossible. And I love that
Right.
about I love that so much because what you said is so true. And we have that, and you have to, and again, the whole theme of what we talked about, but you have to find that, you have to have that in yourself and find it somehow within you in your life, in your journey. Um, and if other people plant the seeds along the way, wonderful. But
Right.
it does have to, for you to know it and know it's true, it has to happen somehow within your life journey. But there
Right.
has to be people who get that around the world to kind of raise that vibrational atmosphere for others, maybe to help them find it easier. And
Right.
I just love that, Tyler, so much.
Well, it kind of what one of the things I heard that really helped me understand that I was on to something and made me not feel so guilty for not going to church and all that stuff. I listened to this interview. It was one of those things you scroll past. I never saved it, didn't know the guy's name. It was this guy, and somebody was asking him about God and all this stuff. And then he said something that it's the only thing I remember from the interview. And he said, I went to church my whole life only to realize I was talking to myself. And it was just completely profound. Like he said,
Yeah.
I thought I was talking to God. I was talking to myself because God was within me. And
Oh,
that's why he had to go to church his whole life to learn that. But I was like, wow, that's profound. And I
it
understand
is.
that now.
Yes. And that's a huge understanding. And I think that's part of our big journey. And that's part of why you're doing what you're doing, you and Aaron. And that's just why I feel like I need to know who you are for future for people to understand as well. So, Tyler, thank you for taking time out of your busy, busy, busy schedule and sharing with me and the audience your life. And I really want everyone to go to Journey to Truth dot online, because everything is there. I'm going to watch the documentary. Maybe I'll take the trip to Hawaii next year, but but it's just you really have put together such a and with perseverance, put together such a wonderful thing for people to see now, but also in the future. So thank you again, Tyler, very much for taking the time out of your busy schedule and spending the hour with me.
Of course, I felt like we barely even scratched the surface, but this was, I really appreciate the unique interview, asking me questions. Like, it's not the same interview I've done over and over. So I got to really talk about some things that no one asked me about, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yay! Absolutely. Well, it's my pleasure, and I think people will really enjoy it. And we'll have to have another talk sometime. Is that cool?
Absolutely. Of course. Anytime. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tyler, so much. It was such a wonderful time. Thank you.
Good night.
Bye.